This Friday, Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan are back to switch things up in Disney's Freakier Friday.
Totally. Yes.
It's an absolute riot. Woo! And the only movie that can be described as
so much weirder than the last time. What last time?
It's the frequel.
You ready?
We've been waiting for.
That absolutely slays. What deeply out of touch old person came up with that? You did. Wow.
Don't miss the comedy event of the summer for all ages. Disney's Freakier Friday. In theaters this Friday. Get tickets now. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested.
This episode is brought to you by Nordstrom. Summer's almost out and fall's calling. Luckily, Nordstrom has everything you need for the season ahead, all under $100. Discover new arrivals from your favorite brands like Mango, Princess Polly, Wave, Free People, BDG, and more. Whether you're planning a last-minute getaway, heading back to class, or refreshing your office looks, you'll find the latest trends and beauty must-haves without breaking your budget. It's easy, too, with free shipping, free returns, and in-store order pickup. Shop today, in stores, and at Nordstrom.com.
This episode is brought to you by Espolón Tequila. Slow, sticky, snoozy. They call these the dog days of summer. But Espolón? They don't do boring. Welcome to the Marg Days. Espolón Tequila. 100% blue Weber agave, born to shake up your summer. Just add lime, agave, and a little attitude. Visit EspolónTequila.com. Espolón Tequila, 40% alcohol, volume 80 proof. Copyright 2025 Campari America, New York, New York. Drink responsibly.
Pie in the Sky Media. This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence throughout. Listener discretion is advised. The views expressed by Criminal Mischief guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the show. It was dark outside the apartment complex. The young woman waited and watched from her car. Inside her friend Brittany's unit, the lights were on, but the apartment looked empty. Still, she hoped. Was she just being paranoid?
The lights were on and the door was open, or there's something that struck her as strange.
The desire to check on Brittany was strong, but fear stopped her from opening her car door. She couldn't propel her legs into action to get up, walk the few steps, and up to Brittany's apartment on the second floor. Her car felt safe. The apartment, well, there was something going on, because Brittany hadn't shown up for school. It was Thursday night, and she hadn't seen her friend since Monday. Where was her brilliant, sweet, and caring friend?
She didn't go in, and she called her dad, who back then was a DA in I think Rogers County, which is right north of Tulsa. And she said, "What should I do?" And he said, "Do not go in. Call the Tulsa police to get a wellness check."
An officer from the Tulsa, Oklahoma Police Department showed up. He was able to get inside Brittany's apartment, where the only movement came from two cats. The officer didn't know this, but Brittany was taking care of them for her mom, Maggie, who had recently moved and was doing some remodeling work at her new home. The officer moved past the small kitchen, heading toward the bedroom. That's when he found her, 18-year-old Brittany Phillips, dead on the floor by her bed, thus beginning the countdown of the doomsday clock, slowly ticking towards a mother's worst nightmare. Maggie had no idea that a knock in the dead of the night was coming her way.
It's like out of a horror movie, but this thunderstorm was happening, a big crack of thunder and a knock on the door. And he goes, "Are you Maggie Zingman?" And I said, "Yes." He hands me this little piece of paper and he says, "You need to call Tulsa police. Your daughter's been murdered," and steps back out into the rain.
Maggie's nightmare was just beginning.
Everybody isn't as hard-headed or resilient or whatever you want to call it that I am. And being treated like this, which I know of other families who are, can just tear a person apart and devastate them and beat them down. With me, you can make me more of a fighter. You do something to me, watch out, because I'm coming back twofold.
A mother who's ignored? Well, that could very well lead to a threat of biblical proportions.
When you hear about Maggie, and when I first heard about her, there was this mama driving across the United States in a Caravan with the suspect's picture on the hood of the car. Yes, I'm going to meet her. Are you kidding me? So she tells me she's coming through Atlanta. She said, do you think we could meet? And I'm like, baby, meet. I'm riding shotgun.
Welcome back to Criminal Mischief with Carolyn and Brandon. You're listening to episode 136, A Mother's Fight for Justice.
My name is Maggie Zingman. Some people call me Dr. Maggie or Dr. Z because I'm a trauma psychologist. But you can call me Maggie. I'm fine with that.
Not only is Maggie a trauma psychologist, she's also a mother to Josh and his little sister, Brittany.
Brittany was my second child. She has a brother who is 15 months older than her. And so I guess they call that Irish twin. So it was like having, two babies for 3 years. And
so you can imagine what life with two little ones at the same time was like. Crazy, hectic, but also so full of joy and happiness. And Maggie had a front row seat. She loved watching her babies grow and develop together and as individuals, because Brittany was a little spitfire.
She was fearless. She would climb on tables. Even before she started taking dance, she would be spinning circles and then she'd bump into the wall. I think by the time she was 2, we had 4 emergency room visits, and she had stitches here, stitches here, stitches here. And at times I would worry, they think I'm abusing her. But no, it was just, she was adventurous.
Maggie got a divorce from the children's father, and in 1991, she and the kids moved to Oklahoma when Brittany was around 5 years old.
She was a gymnast. She was a dancer. I danced for most of my young life. And then as an adult, I also danced in shows. And some of the most beautiful memories I have of when she was 8 and 9, when we were here living in Tulsa then, she would dance in wearable art shows and other shows that we did in Tulsa. And so she just loved doing all those things.
Brittany started school a year earlier than her peers, which meant when she graduated from high school, she was just 17. And when she went away to college, she had big plans to change the world.
In school, she was just studying all the time, to the point that she got a full-ride chemistry scholarship to my alma mater. Yes, this beautiful little girl, who probably would have had 3 kids and a PhD by now, got a full-ride chemistry scholarship. She loved chemistry. And what she wanted to do was, as she was in high school, she lost her dad's mom to cancer. And so that made her want to go into cancer research.
After Brittany finished her freshman year at Eckerd College, a liberal arts school on Florida's Gulf Coast, she decided to move back to Tulsa in May of 2004. That summer, she enrolled at a community college to take some extra classes and also got a job at Applebee's restaurant. When she moved back to Tulsa from Florida, she had originally stayed with her friend in between going to her mom's new house in Chandler, which was about an hour away. But by the end of the summer, Brittany moved into her own apartment, and that September, she began attending school full-time at Tulsa Community College. Her brother Josh was also a student there. He shared a house nearby with roommates. So Brittany was back in Tulsa, where she was closer to her mom and her brother. In fact, on Monday, September 27th, she ran into Josh at school. That's where he learned that she'd been under the weather that day with a sinus infection.
He saw Brittany that night in the cafeteria, before she went to the urgent care. They had seen each other.
By 6 o'clock, Brittany's feeling so sick that she decides to go to the urgent care. Her friend goes with her for moral support. But after waiting for hours without being seen by a doctor, the girls left. Brittany then drove her friend home at around 8 o'clock that night, and then went home to her apartment and called her mom.
Brittany called me about 8:30 at night on September 27th. It was Monday. And she had been at an urgent care for about 2 or 3 hours. She had a beautiful little pug nose. Anyways, she just always had a lot of sinus things, and she had some blood disorders that just caused her to be more allergic. And she'd been there for 2 hours. And Brittany, if she doesn't get something she feels she really needs, gets upset. So she called me upset. She was 18, and said I'd been there for hours and they're not even attending to me. And I was on call that week, so I couldn't come down to Tulsa. I lived about 50 miles away from her because I had just bought a home to be nearer to where I was working. And she had just gone back from college and had moved into an apartment. So I told her, well, we'll be getting together this weekend, because she always would come up, or I'd come down on Friday and Saturday, and I'll get you an appointment with my doctor. So that was 8:30, 9, at the latest 9:30 on September 27th.
How could Maggie have known that this was the last conversation she would ever have with her daughter?
Luckily, the typical thing, told her I loved her. And I always used to say, just think of me holding my hands, your face in my hands. It was just something we had developed over the years, just so we'd have that image.
The next day, a Tuesday, Maggie didn't call Brittany that morning.
And I tried to call her that night, which was Tuesday, the 28th. No answer. Wasn't surprised, because I knew she had late school nights every single night.
By Wednesday, Maggie still hadn't spoken to her daughter.
Wednesday I called, and I knew she had a late class that night. Just left a quick message.
By Thursday, Maggie is starting to worry. I mean, this is a hard time for moms and daughters. Maggie knows Brittany is an adult. She's 18. It's normal for her to be busy with school and friends. But at the same time, she's her mother, and she needs to know that her daughter is okay.
So now we're on September 30th, which is a Thursday. And I called and left a message, and I had left messages like this before. Brittany, I know you're okay. I know you're okay, but please don't do this. Please just call me. Let me know that if I've done something because you're mad at or whatever, just let me know. And I didn't think she was mad at me, but I just didn't know why she wasn't calling me.
And Maggie wasn't the only one who was worried about Brittany. Remember the chain of events. Brittany's friend, the same one who had gone with her to the urgent care 3 days before, was really concerned because Brittany hadn't shown up for school. This was the same friend who'd driven to Brittany's apartment out of that concern on Thursday night. The one who sat in her car, too afraid to go inside of her apartment, contemplating what to do. But her heart told her not to go inside that apartment, and so did her father when she called him. This is the friend who reached out to 911 for a wellness check, where the arriving officer from the Tulsa Police Department found Brittany dead in her apartment. But Maggie had no idea that her daughter had been murdered that night. She was upset that she hadn't heard from Brittany, but on that night, Maggie was distracted too because she was waiting for an out-of-town guest to arrive.
That same night, I was supposed to have a friend driving in from Chicago to visit me.
The friend was delayed, and it was a stormy night. But around 1 a.m., Maggie finally hears a pounding on the door. She thinks it's her friend.
It's like out of a horror movie, but this thunderstorm was happening, a big crack of thunder and a knock on the door, and I expected to open the door and it would be my friend. And I opened the door, and there's this little young-looking sheriff in a raincoat, and he has a piece of paper in his hands, and he goes, "Are you Maggie Zingman?" And I said, "Yes." He hands me this little piece of paper, and he says, "You need to call Tulsa police. Your daughter's been murdered," and steps back out into the rain.
And leaves?
And leaves.
The image of Maggie left standing alone at the door is heartbreaking. The rain pounding around her, pelting off the roof, lightning and thunder cracking in the distance, the wind blowing as she holds a piece of paper in her hand with the name of a homicide detective scrawled next to his phone number. This is out of a horror movie, an all too real scene where she's just been visited upon by the Grim Reaper. Maggie shuts the door on that stormy, windswept night. She's a different person now. Before she opened the door to a man who informed her that her precious daughter was dead.
And I just want to unpack that for a minute because we often, as parents, if someone knocks at your door or calls at 1 a.m, 3 a.m, in those overnight hours, you know it's going to be bad news, pretty much.
Right.
It's the storm is happening. You're by yourself.
But I'm thinking a friend is been delayed by the storm. So I didn't even have a chance. Exactly. I mean, that's a really good point. I didn't have a chance to be fearful of it because that was the farthest thing from my mind. It was my friend who finally got there because they were supposed to arrive 10 or 11. So that, I think, actually made the shock worse because I was going, and then somebody just slaps me with that.
Slaps her with those words. Your daughter has been murdered. Hearing those specific words strung together, it was as if those words had literally penetrated her body, as if she'd been struck by lightning. The volts of grief coursed through Maggie.
I'm in this old 2-story house that was just bought. It was starting to remodel. It had stairs, and the front door is here, and the stairs are back there. And all I remember is just somehow walking backwards, going, this can't be real. This can't be real. And I trip on the stairs and fall down.
The pain knocked Maggie back into reality. Her daughter needed her, which meant she needed to get to Tulsa.
How do I get down there? It's 50 miles away. Who do I call? Can I call my parents? I don't want to wake up my parents. I don't want to wake up my sister. They're in New York and California and another area of New York. And you have all these weird, irrational thoughts because, of course, you're going to call your family. But here I'm going, I can't wake them up. I can't wake them up.
Maggie called her family that night, and then the Tulsa detective, whose name and number had been callously written on that piece of paper. She had to call him. She needed to know where her daughter was.
Of course, I'm going to say, are you sure it's her? Because I thought maybe, they got it mistaken. He said, no, we know it's her. He said, I really can't tell you anything till I see you. He also knew I was alone. He asked if I had anybody there and stuff. And he said, I need, can you get down here? How soon can you get down here,
This detective apologized for the colossal screw-up with the death notification. 3 hours earlier, they had gone to Josh's house on accident and told him that his sister was dead.
What he told me was that 10 o'clock the night before, 2 officers and 2 chaplains came to my son's house. He was renting a house with 3 other people, pulled him outside, sat him down, talked to him, found out where I was. So Tulsa police had done it in the correct way. I was up in a place called Chandler, which is Lincoln County, lived right behind the sheriff's department. The sheriff's department, which I later got all over, didn't follow, and I guess they weren't even trained on notifications at that point. So that's how I got notified the way I was. And later I talked to the head sheriff, because, that alone can kill a person.
The detective, his name was Jeff, asked Maggie to meet him at Brittany's apartment. And Maggie assumed he wanted to meet there so she could officially identify Brittany. Thankfully, Maggie wouldn't be alone on that ride to Tulsa. And just as the sun was beginning to rise, she pulled into Brittany's apartment complex.
Typical crime scene tape and stuff. I go around to the back. Hers was upstairs apartment and the lights were all on. And I thought, oh, maybe they're, still investigating and everything. So I walk in and I see the 2 cats, which she was keeping at her apartment till I was fully in my house, sitting on the couch, just because they had been with her. This is now, remember, I talked to her September 27th. This is October 1st. I'm in her apartment now. And so the cats had been there since she was murdered.
Maggie couldn't help but think that their cats had most likely witnessed her daughter's murder, saw her killer, but she pushed down those thoughts, steeling herself for what she was about to see. Her little girl, barely grown, who was now dead, just a few days before her 19th birthday. Even so, she had to see her daughter, not just for Brittany, but for herself, in order to believe that this was really happening.
A police officer walks out of the bedroom. He goes, "Can I help you?" I go, "I'm her mother. Can I see her?" He goes, "She's not here." I go, "What? Don't I have to identify her?" He said, "No, she was identified by her license." That was one of 3 times I was not allowed to see her. So I never got to see her.
And I'm sensing from you that you're really upset about that.
I was. Stepping back into my psychologist's head, one thing I've learned early on, after about the first year, you can't live in these if-onlys, because when I'm working with other homicide families, a lot of them go, if I just could have said goodbye, if I just hadn't said this, if I just could have seen her face, if we could just find her killer, if we could just convict them. If you wait for these if-onlys, it will tear you apart. And it was doing that in those first months. And I finally had to get back to myself and some of my old therapists, and they reminded me that our brains think it's going to make it feel better. There's no such thing as closure. I hate that word. Closure gives this idea that it all just goes away and the pain isn't there. And that's what those if-onlys are. Because if only I could have said goodbye, maybe. But what makes me angry, truly what makes me angry, is it hasn't just been done to me. And that's what tears my heart. If it was just me, yeah, I'd be angry. But it's done to so many people. And if they don't understand that they can't live in the if-onlys, then they're tortured with it for years. I've met too many parents who are that way.
And I apologize for really wanting to get granular, but I really want to understand.
I love it.
What was done to you in that? What did you feel was being done to you in that moment and has been done to others?
Ripping the person out of your heart, ripping your voice out, ripping your, I did a training at OSBI, the State Bureau, and one of the directors, because I was talking about this, I said, you have to give the family the choice. Otherwise, they're going to live in these, sort of false beliefs. And I said, you can't take those choices. You got one thing for any type of trauma survivor. You have to give them voice. You have to give them a sense of control. And he looked at me and he said, well, and it's this bias, this paternalistic bias, we know better than you. He said, after an autopsy or after they've been dead for 3 days, their body is so distorted, we just don't want to shock you. And I looked him in the eye, and I've looked at other people in the eye, and I have said to them, we're already shocked that our loved one has been murdered or killed or whatever. You can't shock us anymore. And by not giving me or anybody else a choice, you take away part of their healing. You take away their control. And trauma is all that your controlled life goes out of control. And they're taking away that control.
Hellmann's believes they can turn any mayo hater into a lover. So, if you know someone who thinks mayo equals bland, show their taste buds the truth and challenge them to try Hellmann's flavored mayo. With irresistible flavors like Hellmann's spicy mayo, garlic aioli, chipotle, and Italian herb, they'll be eating their words. Challenge haters to try Hellmann's flavored mayo and get them to eat their words. Learn more at hellmanns.com/eatyourwords.
Now at Chipotle, our all-new Chipotle Honey Chicken brings Chipotle heat with a touch of sweet. Seared smoked peppers and savory Mexican spices, blended with a hint of pure honey for a perfectly balanced sauce. All combined with fresh, tender chicken hot off the grill, served up in your favorite burrito or bowl. New Chipotle Honey Chicken takes heat and sweet to a whole new level. But it's only at Chipotle for a limited time. Order now in the app for pickup or delivery. Chipotle, for real.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. From streaming to shopping, Prime helps you get more out of your passions. So whether you're a fan of true crime or prefer a nail-biting novel from time to time, with services like Prime Video, Amazon Music, and fast free delivery, Prime makes it easy to get more out of whatever you're into or getting into. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to learn more.
Buenos dias! Café Bustelo espresso-styled iced coffee is hitting refrigerators with a cold front that'll sweep through your senses. So keep the coffee pours long and the cold sip slow. Café Bustelo está aquí.
Maggie's sense of control being taken away would only increase. She found out that Brittany had been lying on the floor in her bedroom and that she was only wearing a t-shirt. The autopsy report stated Brittany's cause of death was asphyxiation due to neck compression, that she'd either been strangled or suffocated. It was also believed that she'd been murdered sometime after she talked to her mom at 9 p.m. and 8 a.m. the next morning. But as Maggie would come to find out, her daughter's time of death was just the beginning of many issues that would come to haunt her daughter's murder investigation.
Not much is written in the ME's report, which is a whole nother issue, but we need somebody to look at that.
So there's no official time of death listed on Brittany's autopsy report. The ME's report stated that she had reportedly not been seen alive for 3 days. Death was pronounced at the scene on September 30th, 2004 at 10:09 p.m. However, the medical examiner arrived at the scene on October 1st at 1:45 a.m. It was believed that Brittany had been sexually assaulted inside of her apartment before she was murdered.
What they did do, Jeff watched the rape kit. He knows they did the anal and nasal swabs and all that. None of that's listed in the medical report. Now, I'm told that some Tulsa MEs back then kept their own notes, which is very crazy. But, so what I remember him telling me, and again, we didn't have touch DNA. We didn't have any of those things. He said there might be some DNA in there. We took the swabs, but it's been 3 days. She's dead. Stuff might have, it didn't appear that there was a lot. Jump forward all these years later in 2023, when I'm asking him, are you using touch DNA? Are you using the MVAC on all these old evidence and stuff? And the response I got was, you don't need to worry about that, Dr. Zingman. We're doing what we're supposed to.
Well, do you even know what they have?
No, not anymore.
Who killed Brittany? She lived alone and didn't have a boyfriend. So how did the killer get inside of her apartment? Was it a break-in, or had she let him in? Had the killer climbed up to her second-floor balcony and come in that way? The slider was unlocked. Or had he crept in through a hatch that they'd found in a closet? Did Brittany even know about this weird little door that all the units had that connected to a shared common access point? We'll get into this door a little bit later, but for now, at that time, investigators collected forensic evidence from the crime scene, and from that, 5 DNA profiles were isolated.
So initially, they sent off 5 profiles to CODIS, and OSBI was, analyzing and sending and developing the profile and sending it off to CODIS.
According to Maggie, hundreds of people, ex-boyfriends, friends, acquaintances, strangers, sex offenders living in the area, were questioned and had DNA swabs taken and compared to the profiles found at the scene.
Probably compared that DNA to over 1,000 people in his 10 years of doing the case. Every single time it came up, it didn't match. And he would call me up and say, Maggie, we've got a great suspect. We have this guard that's walking around the mall acting like he's part of the case.
Yeah.
Red flags.
Yeah.
Guess what? His number was blocked in Brittany's phone. Test this guy. Even this guy was willing, after a little bit, people didn't understand DNA back then, but he was finally willing to give his DNA. It didn't match. Jeff would call me up devastated time after time after time when it didn't match, and we were getting no hits from the other profiles.
In 2007, desperate for answers, Maggie had an idea. She decided to turn her minivan into an advertisement vehicle. Basically, she had her minivan wrapped in bright pink and purple colors with Brittany's picture on the side of the car. There was another panel saying that she was the mother of a daughter who'd been murdered and that her case was still unsolved. That September, 2007 was the first year of what she would come to call her yearly Caravan to Catch a Killer tour.
It started out because as Jeff did 400, 600, 800 suspects, people said maybe, he went somewhere. We are crossroads, I-35, I-40. We go down to I-20. We have I-44. This is the crossroads of America. So I started researching and seeing about serial killers that killed, all along highways and stuff. And I tried to get, again, too, because we're ruling out so many suspects, tried to get national news. So, because how do you get into a police officer's face? Well, national news, maybe their wife, somebody's listening. So I started off just trying to solve our murder. Just somehow I just started seeing wrapped cars in 2007, found this beautiful man who has now wrapped 5 of my cars, and just started doing quadrants, southeast, northeast, northwest, southwest. Would just get out on the road, look at the city I was going to, find media that wrote stories about similar things, tell them my mission, find them, get into the city the next morning, hopefully get a story, stay there, get people to come up, tell my story, visit the police office, visit lawmakers. I did that for about 5 years and, already was getting 100,000 miles, it seemed like. And then I started talking to families at rest stops in cities about all these other cold cases. And so it slowly evolved to at least half of the mission was giving more families voice. And as my story has gotten older and older, I'm still telling the story, but I'm leaning more now on trying every city I go to find the local stories that aren't getting a voice and then presenting mine, but presenting theirs even more so. And then, just getting my car out the way it's designed, people can look up Caravan to Catch a Killer.
10 years later, after Maggie's first Caravan to Catch a Killer tour began, there would be a break in the case. One of these 5 DNA profiles had been collected from 2 different spots inside the apartment. This suspect had left behind blood in Brittany's sink and semen on her bed sheets. That DNA profile was sent to the Caravan lab, who developed a phenotype sketch of the suspect. Basically, what he would look like based on his genetic profile.
We got the profile, the blood and semen, sent off to Caravan. They made the phenotype sketch, which, they're unique. So we got, in 2017, that came out. Within a month, we got 75 suspects, 75 tips at least. Then I get a call from C.C. Moore, who I talked to a little bit, but that's who was analyzing it. She said, "Are you aware that we offered to do familial..."
Investigative genetic genealogy. Yeah.
Yeah. "Are you aware that we offered that to TPD?" And they said, no. I said, no. So I raised stink, and finally it got sent off to Caravan and C.C. Moore.
Now, I'm sure you noticed the edge in Maggie's voice. It's because this has been a long road for her. But when she worked with the first detective on her daughter's case for 10 years, they had a good relationship. But the relationship with Tulsa police began to sour after her original detective, Jeff, left. Now, I did reach out to Tulsa PD with an interview request, but haven't heard back. And according to Maggie, in time, investigative genetic genealogist C.C. Moore was able to find a potential match to that phenotype sketch based on suspect DNA.
In 2019, I was doing a caravan out to your state and Idaho and all those others. And I'm in Yakima, Washington, doing a podcast. And C.C. Moore had told me this was going to happen. The first part she told me was going to happen. My detective calls me and he says, "Maggie, C.C. Moore identified the owner of the DNA. She didn't find his father. She didn't find his brother. She found him. We went out and interviewed him. We got his DNA, which they have to do. They can't just use what was found at the crime scene. They have to prove it's the same one. And he's not our killer."
At the time, she was told by the new detective working her daughter's case that the suspect had been ruled out because he had a rock-solid alibi, one that he wasn't at liberty to share. However, Maggie says she found out why he claimed his semen and blood were at Brittany's apartment. And apparently there was a witness who corroborated his statement.
But his ex-girlfriend and her father said, he doesn't get angry, whatever. They gave help support the alibi. And I only knew one person who I was thinking, why would the girlfriend and the father say it? And the only reason a father would say it is because the father was a retired police officer. That was the police officer who was the father of my daughter's best friend. What ends up happening is they were there the Friday before she was killed. My daughter is a sweet little girl who at 18 felt bad for her 17-year-old best friend who had a boyfriend and let them sleep at her house. And so she would give them her bed. A 17-year-old who has a dad as a cop is not going to want to be sleeping at her house, and stuff. And both of them were afraid to say something early on. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff. But I was in shock.
Maggie was even more shocked when Tulsa PD shared with her the press release stating the suspect they'd been looking for in that phenotype sketch had been cleared.
And the copy said something to the extent of there was a DNA profile that the police have been using to compare to suspects. From this DNA profile, Caravan made a phenotype sketch. We got many tips from this phenotype sketch, and one of them sent us to this individual that we thought might be the killer, and he wasn't. When you say a tip comes from a picture, you interrogate the person and he's not our killer. How is that different from C.C. Moore analyzed this DNA for a year and a half, finally was able to narrow it down to the owner of the DNA, who then became our suspect, who we then went out and interviewed, and who we now are saying is not our killer. The identified DNA is not our killer versus the suspect from a tip from a picture.
Well, why do you think they did that? What was their motivation for doing that?
You could not tell me. Part of whenever he couldn't tell me something, it would hurt the case for us to let that out.
Maggie was down, but she wasn't about to give up. She kept talking to people about Brittany's case, and she also turned her attention to the 4 other suspect DNA profiles that had been found at her daughter's apartment.
About 3 years ago, doing an interview with Paul Holes in the murder squad, and Polly, God love her, got me $6,000 to send more DNA off. We were planning, before the second detective retired in 2023, we were planning, after I got the money, we were going to be able to send off another profile. $6,000 just to send off one profile.
Are you talking about the other 4?
Yeah, but one of the other 4.
One of the other 4, okay.
Which the detective never told me what this next profile was and why the hell they didn't send it out the first time. I have no idea. Because guess what this next profile that is now being analyzed by Othram is?
Fingernails?
It's believed that Brittany was sexually assaulted before she'd been smothered to death. These scrapings collected underneath her fingernails back in 2004 had come back with a male DNA profile. But Maggie was only just hearing about it in 2023. The fingernail scrapings were sent to Othram for more advanced DNA testing, as well as investigative genetic genealogy work, which would take time. In the meantime, there was another twist in this case. In January 2023, Maggie got a call from her ex-husband. For the first time, he told her about a letter he'd received from Brittany back in 2004. At the time, he was so grief-stricken that he read the letter and then put it away in a box for safekeeping. Apparently, Brittany was in the habit of sending cards to her father that she then wanted him to send to her grandfather. But the thing about this particular card was that when her father was looking at the postmark on the letter 19 years later, he realized it was dated for September 29th, 2004, 2 days after Brittany was said to have been murdered.
She never could remember, nor could I, her grandfather's on her dad's side address because he lived out in the country. So each year, twice a year for different events, she would send a card to her dad to send to her grandfather. So he tells me when I got it, I showed it to my dad, I showed it to my wife, I showed it to my kids. We all touched it. I didn't think anything about it. And then I put it in a box for 19 years.
So does that change the time of death? Is that what you're thinking, or what?
Remember, the medical examiner never fixed the time of death, only saying he'd been informed that Brittany was last seen 3 days before she was found murdered. If you'll recall, Brittany dropped her friend off at home that Monday night after they left the urgent care together, and before she'd called her mom at around 9 p.m.
On this envelope was a stamp that was dated 2 days after Brittany died, a machine-made stamp. If you remember, the ME had said in those early days, she probably died sometime on the 27th between 9 p.m., right after I talked to her, till 8 a.m. the next morning. This was 2 days later.
If law enforcement had been operating under the belief that her death was on September 27th and into the next morning, the 28th, and if Brittany did send that letter, then her time of death is different, which means the alibis in the investigation that were accepted would need to be reinvestigated. Or it could mean that Brittany gave the letter to someone to mail for her, and they have never come forward yet. Maggie gave the letter to Tulsa PD, hoping they'd be excited about this breakthrough. But so far, nothing has come from it. And so, for the last 20 years, Maggie has continued to travel the country in her bright purple and pink minivan, trying to raise awareness about her daughter's murder investigation.
You brought up a point. Understaffed, underfunded, etc. That's why a lot of police departments accept these certified, established cold case task force to help investigate these cold cases. It's what helps solve them. Are you aware of Cheryl McCollum?
Yeah, I love Mac. Yeah, love me some Mac.
Yeah, I love me some Mac. Mac, has been a godsend ever since I drove through Atlanta. She got into my car and she got me a story with CBS and Nancy and all these things. And she's just been a godsend.
Next time on part 2 of Criminal Mischief.
And you went on some ride along or something. Okay, cool.
Oh, I sure did. Yeah, buddy. Okay.
Oh my gosh, you were already making me laugh. Okay, so here how you want me to introduce you to the show.
Cheryl McCollum. I'm a crime scene investigator for a local Atlanta police department. I run the Cold Case Investigative Research Institute. I run the Wildlife CSI Academy, and I have a podcast called Zone 7.
You do so much for so many people. This situation where I'm interviewing Maggie, and then all of a sudden she talks about, do you know Cheryl McCollum? And I'm like, Cheryl Mac McCollum? Yeah.
When you hear about Maggie, and when I first heard about her, there was this mama driving across the United States in a Caravan with the suspect's picture on the hood of the car. So I'm going to meet her. Are you kidding me? So she tells me she's coming through Atlanta. She said, do you think we could meet? And I'm like, baby, me. I'm riding shotgun. You tell me where to be, and I am jumping in that car. So she actually came to my police department. Everybody in CID comes out. They're all like, I've never seen anything like it. Like, here's the dude's picture. And the way they got the picture is through phenotyping. Yes.
She had the phenotype picture on the hood. And I'm sorry I'm laughing, but it's just...
Girl, when I tell you, it was gangster. Because here's this woman in her 70s, all by herself, crisscrossing the United States, pulling up in communities, pulling up at truck stops, pulling up wherever to say, hey, you know this guy?
In a horrible limbo for grieving families. Up next, Criminal Mischief bonus content. Here, my co-host, Brandon, and I discuss the case in more detail. And if you want to listen and watch the show, head on over to Criminal Mischief's YouTube channel. And as always, Thanks for listening. From Pie in the Sky Media, Criminal Mischief is an EVO production, recorded live in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. We're produced by Brandon Morgan and myself. Music by Soundstripe. For EVO Creative, I'm Carolyn Osorio, your writer and host.